Hello, and welcome to GP project management and project planning. For those of you that haven't been on any of my courses or webinars in the past, my name's Luann Stewart, and I'm a full-time practice manager working currently in a rural practice. On top of that, I also produce some webinars and some training. And I've created and worked through many projects in my time in practice management and in other roles. And I'd just like to share some of that learning with you in case it may be useful for you. So let's start with the very basics of what is a project? Well, a project is a piece of work that's planned to deliver a particular aim. So projects in our GP surgeries could include things like updating our estates, starting maybe a new intranet, organising a new service spec, or just changing the ways we work, which involves a lot of change management. And we can turn that into an actual project with a start and an end with a particular aim in place. And that can help us through to put together a project plan that's a lot more likely to then have a successful outcome than just the muddling through that sometimes we have to go through because we're so busy. So hopefully there's some documents that will be coming out that can help you get through these projects, and with a little bit more of a background and some templates that could actually assist you with what you need to know, what you need to get done, and when you need to do it. And quite often the important bit is who needs to be doing this. It's so often within practice management that as a practice manager, we start doing everything all on our own, thinking we're the only person that can do things, when actually we have a whole team, and getting the buy-in of your team, particularly when there's a huge amount of change management to happen within a project, can be the way to make it a lot more successful. Plus, there are going to be people that parts of the project will be a lot better than you will be at those particular areas, because we all have different skills, so we need to get those skill mixes in. So all projects should start with stage one, and this is standard with any project looking at discovery. This doesn't have to be an NHS project. This could be a project in your own home, planning some new kitchen to go in or something. So all projects need to start with discovery. What does the project need to be successful? So we need a clear senior management ownership and leadership. That's because that's where the final decisions can often be implemented or take place. You can't have a junior team deciding everything when they haven't got the authority to put it in place. So you do need to have a buy-in from that senior management. Appropriate skills for the project team. So as I said before, that can't just be you. There will be IT or reception, clinical, depending on the project. And we should each have our own clear roles and responsibilities within that project. And to make any project, whether it's a GP one or something else, successful, we need effective financial control. We don't all have all the money in the world to spend on this, and an overspend can mess up the budget in other areas. So we need to know that we've got that financial control. We also need a success criteria that link our objects to our outcomes. So clear links within our key strategic priorities. So for most of us, that is healthcare. So we do need to think of the project, the cost of that project, and when we get to the end of it, is it going to have the desired outcomes? Sometimes you won't know for sure, but we can start thinking ahead about that. So to be successful, we need to consider all of these things. We need to think about risk management. Are we covered for all our risk management? Are there risk assessments done? Do they need to be completed for various parts? And can we make sure those are in place? We need to involve our key stakeholders throughout the project. If this is a project, for instance, that would involve a patient project, that you are moving those patients into some particular council-led, your local council might hold local facilities that you are quite trying to send your patients to, we need to involve those stakeholders from the council to make sure there is place, or that where we're thinking would be a really good place to send our patients isn't just about to close down for refurbishment. So get those key stakeholders involved right from the beginning. We need to break down the plan, depending on how big the project is, into manageable steps. If we can get through one step at a time, one hurdle at a time, with a clear end date, it makes the project a lot easier to manage. And then our effective project integration between our team and our supply chain. So in the NHS, that is our patients. This works in any project anywhere. So for instance, if you work in transport, your supply chain might be your passengers. So we need to think of this as project managing, and then as an aside, project managing within a GP practice, so that we learn how to project manage every project that we have within our lives. And as I say, that can work perfectly well in your home life as well. And then we have to think, is it really a viable and worthwhile project? You have to think about the mission, what we're trying to achieve, and make that case for starting a project. And then we need to make sure that the necessary authorization exists to undertake the project. So if this is a project that's going to cost a lot of money, there isn't funding for it, you need to have the buy-in from the partners, because generally that's where the money is coming from. If this is a funded project that you are going for, make sure that you have that funding agreement in place. There are various things to consider to make sure that you've got that authorization in place. And to do that, you need to make sure that your project really is a viable and worthwhile project, not just to you, but to all your stakeholders as well. And to start with, we have different types of initial project management that we need to consider. So we need to look at influence. Who can influence the project? That might be a partner, it might be a manager, depending on the structure in your particular surgery. We need people that can agree to those decisions. And some of that is their skill rather than the financial decision. That can be IT, or it can be clinical. It might be reception. If you're looking at a big change management project that's going to affect your receptionist, don't forget that your reception supervisor or reception manager should probably be part of that skill mix, because they will know day to day how things work. And you may have a great idea, but they may tell you, actually, that can't work in our current circumstances. There may be IT reasons that things can't work that you won't be aware of. So get the buy-in from your ICB IT to maybe attend the odd meeting, or at least give you some documentation, and liaise directly with your IT lead to get some ideas. So make sure you've got that full team that you need for your specific project. Define those objectives and think about how a solution could be provided by putting your project in place, and to create that outline business case. So we do need to have a business case, and there are different types of business cases. Some may be very small, and this might depend on if you are perhaps going for funding that involves a project. They may actually give you a specific document or template to fill out. If you're going through a merger, or a potential merger or takeover of another practice, that will involve a bigger business case. If you're looking at involving having an extension put on, or buying a building to turn into the admin area of your surgery, that again will be a larger business case. Some of that might be an in-house business case, and then you may have to fill out particular documentation to get particular funding. We are going to cover the different types of business cases within this structure. There are a couple also of other webinar type videos that we've made. One on merging. So if you're in a merging situation, I would recommend you look at this as a project, but then also watch one on merging practices, because that will give you very specific ideas towards that. There is a video on estates. So again, if you're planning an extension, that will give you the more detail on planning your extension, but you can look at your business case within this to plan how to put together a business case that will work for your partners and team, explaining the whys and wherefores and the reason behind doing that. So there are all different videos as well that might work alongside this, depending on what your particular project is, that may be able to help you a little in defining your project and working through it. So to break down, we need to discuss our initial ideas of our project. First of all, with your partners or your management team, if you're lucky enough to have a reasonable sized management team that might involve an assistant manager or a reception manager if it's a reception project, a dispensary manager if the project involves the dispensary, or it might just be for you and your partners to sit down and discuss and make sure it is manageable. It is no good putting a project together and then the partners say no. Is the project really needed? Is there more good that can come out of it than challenges that may lead to nothing or may lead to a lot of expense without a finalized project? Can we afford it? If there are costs involved, sometimes it's change, but would that change have unseen costs? Would it upset some senior members of the team so much that you could end up with a recruitment issue? So we need to think of everyone that's going to be involved, how it will affect them, how it will affect our patients, if it is a health project, or how it will affect the general health and well-being of our team. When we're taking on something, are we going to have some upset? Will it make a difference? Can we work through that change management? If we are looking at something like merging or taking on an extra practice, can we afford it? Definitely comes into it, because there are cost implications at the beginning, as there are with an extension, before you reap the benefits and reap the rewards. So can you get through that challenging year? All of this needs discussing at a high level. So that would be potentially with the partners, who will need to be updated throughout the project, but maybe don't need to be at every project meeting. So this is something to consider. And is there funding that we can tap into? Get all those details before you just start discussing it with the partners, but then they may also have ideas of different funding streams that you may not be aware of. And next we need to look at the business case. So all projects you have to write a business case for. You should be writing a business case even for an informal project if it's big enough within your surgery. So if you're thinking perhaps that there is some funding to put in an intranet, but that might be just for the IT. It might be, oh, this is free, that looks good, but we need to look at the project management of that, looking at people's time. The time that will go into setting things up, is it worthwhile? And for that we can formulate a business case. So these business cases need to be of a different size and a different quality, and with different criteria, depending on whether it's a big external project involving lots of stakeholders, if it's a project where we're applying for large amounts of funding, that may be really different, or if it's a very small in-house project that we're just looking at how the change management would affect our team. If we go ahead, even if there are no financial implications, or if a project will affect our patients in a positive manner or not such a positive manner. And then we need to look at that as a smaller business case that will be an internal business case that maybe we're only sharing within our surgery teams, or our surgery teams and our PPG. So we need to have a look at different types of business cases, and we will give you some examples. We do have some paperwork that will come out, and there will be some details that will come out to you of how to gain that bundle of paperwork. And within the bundle of paperwork, there are some different types of business plans that may be useful for you to know. There'll be some large business case templates, some slightly smaller ones, and then also some plan on a page, which we'll discuss later, to give you some ideas of different types of business cases and how to work with them. But as I say, you may also be given a template if you are working for funding for an outside business case or business plan. So you divide the case across the team in speciality areas. So we need to have a meeting, and you need to not micromanage and hang on to that business case. We need to divide up the different areas. So we need to have someone that's representing the different parts of the plan that we can then put together and bring together to make a worthwhile business case. And then we need to work forward with that. So as I explained, a larger business case might need a larger project plan to go into place. So we need to present this potentially to stakeholders, so it may need a lot more detail. And when we're looking at presenting at stakeholders, that might be to our PCN, our clinical director, and all the other representatives of our PCN. You may have a board that it needs to go through. You may be considering our PPG or local businesses around. It may have to be presented to the ICB or NHS England. So therefore it needs to be of a high quality, and it will need to be extremely detailed if you're going up to those levels, particularly if you're going to large amounts of funding. We could be talking hundreds of thousands of pounds in funding that you are applying for on behalf of your GP practice or of your PCN if you're a PCN manager. And there may be a really big bundle of work to be done that involves looking at estates. Have you got the space to do this project? Have you got the manpower? It might be a tiny project that we're looking at that it just involves your team and just different ways of working, and therefore it will be a smaller business case that we need to put in for our project management plan. So all business cases, regardless of a size, will include an executive summary. It might be a much larger executive summary in your bigger business cases. It might be a very small one, in a localized one, down to a line or two and a plan on a page, which, as I said, we'll discuss later. You need a strategic case, why we're doing this, what our thoughts and aims are behind this, our business strategies and needs, our business scope, and our risk and our mitigation. So we do always need to look at the risk involved, whether that risk is financial, whether it is a recruitment risk. We have to plan for failure to hopefully stop that failure happening. So that's why that needs to be there within that business case. And we need to look at constraints. We need to look at the tenders, if there are tenders that are required. This is there are parts in every template and every case study, business case study, that involve all of these different areas, but they may not be relevant for your particular project. If it is, say, a change management style, different ways of working, that there won't be any need for tenders. But if you are looking at perhaps purchasing large amounts of equipment, you may be looking at costings. There may not be tenders, it might just be costings about purchasing from different places. So we need to look at all of those variables. We need to consider are communication plans needed? Do we need a full comms plan to allay the new ways of working, not only to our teams, or do we need a bigger comms plan to go out to the wider community? Do our patients need to understand this project, how it's going to make a difference to them? We have popped in an example of a communications plan and how to do that for your bigger projects within the bundle of paperwork, which will hopefully help you to work through and understand the communications that need to go out and who they might need to go out to. We'll have to look at the risk and the affordability if it goes wrong. Is there too much to risk? Is there a lot of money that will go into place that perhaps if this doesn't work, we can't afford to lose? And how big is that risk? Is it a tiny risk? Everything comes with risk, or is it quite a likely risk? And therefore, the risk goes up. So we have to watch those finances even more. We have to put a financial case together to look at the affordability of this. And we have to look at our management plan, our team, our workload. Are they already exhausted with work? Can they also fit this in? And when we are planning that, all of those things, we need to consider time as really important as part of our financial case. Your time is not free, and neither is your team's time. We may already be there which is something I've heard people say before when they're planning a project. We're already paid to be here, so why does our time count? Your time counts because you could be doing something else for the business, and therefore your time needs to be considered. Even if this is only an internal financial costing for your partners to be aware of, that perhaps you won't have time to do X, Y, Z because you are doing this project. But when this project comes to an end, or if you can delegate parts of the project, freeing up some of your time, there is a financial case to put together. It may be that you will have to hire someone to project manage for you because you simply don't have the time, and that needs to go into the financial case as part of the business case. So you may, for instance, be taking on a project management project and taking charge of it, but you may actually end up having to hire someone to do the day-to-day work, and that would need to be considered in your financial case when you're going through. Your business case may also involve mobilization plans. So that could be that, for instance, as we mentioned, that could be something like a merge, and you are looking at maneuverability, where you are going. Are you mobilizing your team? Are you sending your team? Could be a health plan where your team is going out into the community. You need to consider all of those things as well as your IT planning. And you do need to get your PPG and your PCN potentially involved depending on what the project is. So make sure that you have some space to pop that onto an agenda or to discuss it and get things minuted if it's that kind of project plan. We're trying to generalize here a little bit so that this can fit any plan that you may have and that you want to work through. And one thing that's really important and people forget sometimes is we need to do a baseline assessment. Now, there is an example that will be within the bundle of documents that explains roughly what needs to be in a baseline assessment. And that is where are we now? What's the difference if we do nothing? Because doing nothing is always part of your business case. There will be different examples that you need to work through, doing a full plan, doing a partial plan, but doing nothing is always one of the possibilities, because doing nothing and standing still may actually be the answer. So we need to look at where we are now, what improvements we can make, and then we need to show as we go through the actual project management of the project, show the improvements so that we can show that this is a worthwhile project. Depending on the size of the project, your baseline assessment may be a completely separate document. It may be an embedded document within your business case, or it may just be a few lines in your business case if it's a really simple, straightforward project, such as let's bring an intranet into the surgery. What do we do now? We just communicate and talk with each other, and then look on the drive on our computer to find documents. So it may be a couple of lines. You may not need to do a full huge assessment, but you may need to. And when you are, if it is something like that intranet, you need to consider the training of your staff to know how to use it. So there will be a separate document in there. Now, many times if you're going for funding for something, I know for a few years ago, I applied for a funded project from NHS England on behalf of the PCN that I was covering at the time. And what they asked for was a plan on a page. And the idea of that is your plan on a page is simply to be almost ahead of doing a business case. It is, don't spend all that time doing a huge business case. Let's do a plan on a page and let's see if the idea that you've got is even worthwhile spending the time doing a business case. They may give you some objectives to get into that plan on a page. They may just leave you to it, and then we've got some ideas of what you need to pop into that. So sometimes this is a real easy document to put together to just decide if a business case needs to go ahead. And there is a plan on a page sample within the documents. So what the plan on a page needs is a short executive summary. This could be a line, a priority area for improvement, some objectives in there, some stakeholder mapping. Who's this going to affect? Who's going to get involved? some measurements, how we would measure. So pre and post plans for how those measurements could take place. And remember, those could be qualitative measurements, not always quantitative. So we can really think through those and decide what would be a good way to plan. And sometimes maybe a plan A and a plan B. We could do this if we achieve all of the funding. If you only give us half of the funding, we could achieve this. And sometimes if there are different pots of money, you've got to kind of put a case together to get both, or either or. So plan for the top one, but a bit of that, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, put in a plan A and a plan B. So to give you an example of a plan on a page that I worked on, as I mentioned before, for the PCN, I worked on a project where we were asked to pick a project to improve the population health of our particular patients. So at the time I was working in a particularly deprived area. So my short executive summary, almost a line, was tackling obesity in a deprived area using alternative methods for our patients involving social prescribing. Simple executive summary, just a line. Our priority area for improvement was tackling our obesity. We were looking at helping to improve the health of those patients by allowing them to lose weight. And we did that not by sending them to Weight Watchers or the gym, because we knew that wouldn't work, but by actually working with a social prescriber to get them interested in doing something else, which would perhaps get them moving a little bit and taking their mind off of food. Our actual, just out of interest, most successful client within that didn't go to anything like a gym or Weight Watchers. We got the social prescriber to work with him to join a choir, something he'd always wanted to do. Then he started to take interest in his appearance because he was actually leaving the house, and he started to lose weight. So it was that using alternative methods that worked. So we popped that into our plan on a page, not that particular person and what happened, but we showed that later on within the measurements and of our successes. Our objectives, as I've said, was tackling the obesity. Our stakeholder mapping, who will this affect? Well, obviously our patients, but it will also affect those areas that we are planning and hoping that our social prescriber would be able to prescribe into, which aren't just gyms. There were, in this case, singing clubs. So we worked very closely with the council on this particular project. So we involved them in all of our planning because they were integral to this project being a success. And then looking at ways of measurements, again, that didn't necessarily need to be, in our case, it was an obesity plan, but it didn't necessarily have to show losing weight. That is a very positive. But we could also look at PAM scores to see your happiness scores. Were people happier? Were they visiting the GP less because they were actually occupying their time and doing something they enjoyed? Were they in general healthier, even if they didn't lose masses of weight? So there are different ways of showing your measurements, and that's something you need to think about. Don't just think of the obvious, think outside the box, think of that qualitative care that we can be offering if it is that kind of project. So we've only got through stage 1 so far. So going on to stage 2, we need to define those requirements. We need to document our deliverables and our acceptance criteria, and then break down that workload. And again, don't get into that, the manager needs to do everything. Let's start breaking that down, delegating that out, making sure that the right parts are sat with the right people in the projects. We need to get a cost breakdown of how much it's going to cost, so estimate it. Don't forget to add a little bit extra on, that contingency plan, because there will always be the unknown. And as I mentioned earlier, don't forget your staff costs. Do you need to have a GP there at all times, perhaps, if it's not something that you can just feed back to them? Because if you do, you need to be counting those GP hours that they could have been sat with patients or doing something else as counted within your costs. So you do need to consider that. You need to do an options analysis. So have a look at different ways you could do things and work out the best ways. look at those different options, how much they all cost, and include that within your business case. So there are different variables. Don't just get tunnel visioned into the way you would like it to work. And that's why we have meetings and we involve a team, because different people have different ideas. And some of those ideas are really good and they can help you. If it's something that you need to do, you might have to identify a procurement strategy and process. So where you're getting your things from and how that's going to work. So that can be different things. So it might not be a procurement in the sense of stuff. It could be in people. You might be thinking of tendering if it's something that you're using an outside team for. You might be looking at procurement of 20 items of medical equipment for a particular enhanced type of service that you can work across the PCN. Are there different strategies that you can use? Are there different ways? Are there different funded ways you can get those? Or just people that will offer you a discount? Sometimes you need to consider that. And are there rules? Are you having to use particular NHS supplied stuff? We need to look at a business change impact assessment. How is this going to change your business? It's no good just tacking a project on. If you are doing a healthcare project, is there something that you can lose from your surgery because this project encompasses part of that? And can that staff member then be multi-used? Will they come across and do some of the project for you? Make sure it's in their job description and please involve them. Do not just assume people will want that change. Not everyone does. You have to look at your equality impact assessment and your comms planning. As we discussed earlier, we do need to make sure there are some comms planned, and we do need to look at equality impact assessment to make sure that we are being fair and equitable in what we are deciding. And then consider your meeting plans. So you need to organise and have regular update meetings. Definitely have a minute taken. We need to prove those minutes have taken place. Invite people. It doesn't have to be a beautiful embossed invitation. I'm talking about an email invite, something that people can receive and know that they've got to fit that into their diary. Does it always need to be face to face? Can it be Teams if somebody is having to travel? Or can it be a mixture? Can you have a face-to-face meetings for those that are localized with a Teams link where a computer sat in the room so someone can join if they are not able to get into that meeting? Book a room if you need to, preferably a meeting room within your own business. We don't want to waste money on lovely rooms with cups of cappuccino and pastries laid out, and suddenly all your business money has gone on the meetings. So we need to make sure that the money that you have set aside to use for this project is actually used for useful parts of the project. And does everyone need to be in the meetings at all times? If you have clinical teams that need to be there, do they need to be there while we're discussing the IT? Or do they have patients to see? So we do need to think about that, because time is money. And then we need to organise that workforce plan. So we separate the job roles within the project down to design, people with that more design mind, communications, IT, estates, and putting someone in charge of the budget. I know I've led a lot of projects. I've managed an awful lot of big and small projects, including mergers, estates, but also our obesity project, setting up new workforce planning, working new teams together. And all of those, although I have taken an overall lead in them, I have kept control of the budget, purely because finance is my area and that is where I feel most comfortable, and I know it's something I'm good at. But I know there are far better people than me to take charge of the communications, getting that right message out to our patients, IT, estates planning. Some of that I will give to other people, and some of it I will look for what's out there and what's free, because there are parts of the ICB that you can lean on to assist you in certainly connections with estates, IT and comms, and get that free help in. Don't ever turn it away if you can have something free, even if you've got a member of your team that's liaising with them just to get the best deals that you can. You always take the help. So we need to look at our communications plan. And as I said, we do have a template that's sitting in here that's worthwhile for you and shows you how to work through a comms plan. RCICB, if their comms team, will help you. All ICBs have a communications team. Most people never ask them to help you, but actually they're very willing and they put together some really nice paperwork. You can influence it and have an idea of what you want to be said in there, but they can also reach far and wide with their own ICB social media and ICB websites and getting things out into the wider meetings to wider stakeholders. So they have those connections. If they have those connections, then use it. Work with them. Don't try and work alone. You may have to go through some documents that involve you completing a project initiation document or a PID. Often that will be the case if it's an ICB led plan, that they need you to complete one of those, and then they will give you a template generally. Make sure you make that template really, really enriched, gets as much detail in as you possibly can, particularly if you're going up against other people. A really detailed project initiation document with lots and lots of plans and preparation involved in it will actually more likely get you to get the funding for any project that you're going for than one that's only got a couple of lines because you assume they would know this stuff. Make sure it's detailed, get it on the paper and make sure it's there. Again, if you are writing a PID, you need to look at all the parameters, define your project, define your structure, talk about your project management team, look at risk, look at issues, and go back to that point that I made earlier of what if we did nothing? Because if we did nothing, which is part of your business case or your PID, you will need to show that actually doing nothing isn't a possibility. So therefore, this is why you need this particular funding. So you need to be really strong in your approach. Again, if you are looking at estates, there is a separate video that explains that and does give you a sample PID that is very specifically written to go for estates money using the ICB's pot of money for that. Then we're at stage 3. We've been talking for quite some time now, and we've only just got to stage 3, but stage 3 is looking at the proper planning. There's a lot more planning to a project than doing, because if you get the planning right, when you come to the doing part of the project, it should run smoothly. So we had to lay out the full scope of the project team, our company, our stakeholders, look at all the activities that we need to accomplish, finally confirm that final cost, who's involved and when, and make sure that that business case is still viable. Have we added loads of stuff in and not costed it because we've just remembered that this needs to happen or that needs to happen, or suddenly a viable, great member of the team has handed in their notice and you need to recruit? You need to make sure anything that's added in gets moved into that business case so that you're fully aware of all the funding issues and the viability of the business case. So when we're planning this and we've got our spec agreed, our procurement activities agreed, if they're required, they're not in every business project management plan. So don't worry if you're project managing something and you don't have a procurement activities part, because it may not be necessary for your particular project. Identify all your delivery tasks and share those with your team. Keep your team updated. That doesn't always have to be a meeting. You can arrange that once a week we have an update of where we are via email, but don't just be the only person contributing to that. Make sure that your entire team is adding something into this and making sure that they are fully aware of what's going on. And then we start to execute that actual plan. So the exciting bit. Don't forget to keep all of your team who haven't been involved within that particular niche project team, keep them involved, get their buy-in at this stage, particularly if they are going to be part of that change management, part of the area that you're going to need them to do something else, then get them involved at this stage. Make sure they understand the plan, why we're doing it, confirm that we've got any resources available, things can be delivered if they need to be. Consider that delivery schedule. Is it a good time to be doing this? Are we doing something in the middle of flu season, when perhaps that's not the time because half our staff are involved with that? Can it be delayed by a month? Do we need alternative accommodation while whatever project is happening is happening? And if so, have we made a plan for that? We haven't forgotten it. And is that part of your financial plan? Because it really needs to be. That can be expensive. You need to finalise that budget, then make sure there is a contingency in there because you will need it. There is always something that's being forgotten and prices keep rising, as we know. So we need to plan for the worst. Again, make sure that's all in there in your business case before you finally get really going on this project. Do not rush the planning side of things. We really need to think about what could go wrong. We can go over and over our business case, making sure that all of these things are taken into account. Is our budget correct? Is our workforce correct? Is everybody in place? Is everybody likely to be there for the length of the project? If they can't be there for the length of the project for any reason, you may have a key member of staff that's about to go on maternity leave. Can they get their part done? Is everything going to be in place so that this project can go ahead regardless of if an important person steps away at this point? Is it going to work? Can we make sure that we can get everything going with this and that the project is going to be successful? And don't do anything until we have worked through all of those risks. We've looked at the risk assessments of anything going wrong with any of those things. We've discussed all of that within both our project team, but also the wider team, because sometimes you've got everything in place with your project team, you put it out to the wider team, and then sit back and wait. Don't rush, because at some point someone may come forward with an idea and say, have you considered this? And it may be just something outside the box that you've missed, and it's worthwhile listening to that. And then you may have to revisit that business case, go back and look over again any more ideas that we can do to make things really work better. So it's not over until we have gone through all of those stages and then we've revisited them all over again to make sure that it really is a viable project that's going to work, it's going to be financially viable, and it's going to keep your workforce happy and your patients potentially happy. Make sure that funding, if it is a funded project, wait for that piece of paper that tells you that you have actually got the funding. Don't rely on word of mouth, a quick chat, somebody telling you it's okay, because funding can change. So make sure you have got that viable piece of paper or email telling you that the funding is yours, and only at that stage, if it is a funded project, that you've got everything in place, can we then go to the execution of the project. So at that point, do not settle back. We're not there yet. You feel that you've got there, you've spent months planning this, you've got everyone that's agreed to everything within the project, you're feeling that you're really good and everything's ready and you can just throw it out there and it's all going to be right. But actually it needs monitoring and control at this stage. You need to constantly monitor to make sure that the final deliverable meets the acceptance criteria. Is it working? You may have a great plan that looks fantastic on paper, but when it comes to it, particularly say if it's something that involves patients, and you think this will be a wonderful way to change the way patients do things, and then the comms go out and you're ready and no one turns up. This can be something that happens, and therefore, if that happens, you may need to go back and stop your project or put it on hold and revisit that business case and reevaluate all over again. What went wrong? At one stage, has anything broken down? Did the comms not go out properly? Did we not explain it well enough to our patients? Is it something that we thought they'd be interested in and they're really not? What can we tweak to make this project work? We've given so much of our time to it, we need to get it right. Hopefully, none of those things will happen. Hopefully, you'll go out there and everything will work great. Do please remember to train your staff as required. There is nothing worse than have not been part of that perhaps project team. You feel that you've got everything in place. It's really easy. You can't just throw a script in front of, say, your receptionist and say, right, go for this from today with no training in place. You will soon see things just break down and fall. I suppose an example of things like that is if you've watched things like Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, and you will see him go in and train the staff for just an afternoon, and then they always fail on that first night because they've had 2-3 hours training. I know it makes good TV, but this isn't TV. This is your project and your place. So involve that staff training and do it in different ways. If training on Teams or training on face-to-face work best with different people, see if you can offer a variety of training. Not everyone works well just from pieces of paper and reading it and trying to learn in that manner. People require all different ways of training. So therefore, make sure that they get the training that they need to move forward with this project. Think about any exception planning, anything that you're going to not be able to achieve. Look at your quality management. Make sure that you are offering a quality project in whatever that form that project might be, and that the quality hasn't dropped. So we do need to keep monitoring to make sure the quality is there. That quality can be all sorts of different things. You can look at the quality of your staff dealing with your patients on a particular project to make sure that's right. If it's a intranet being brought in, you can look at the quality of the IT, the provider. Is everything lagging? Have we not got the equipment quite right? Do the staff not understand how to use it? To something as simple as, if it's an estates project, you'd look at snagging. We've all had something done at home where we've gone round and then pointed out to the builder all the bits that weren't quite as we expected them to be. So that's all part of your quality management, making sure that the project that you plan to do at the beginning feeds through and becomes the project at the end that is the project that you wanted it to be. I'm not suggesting there won't be tweaks along the way. There may be, you may completely change things because they may not work as they are. You may have to build templates in IT to make things, if it's an NHS style enhanced service, but it's a specific one to you that you have created and made. You may need to get templates made. They may need tweaking. So keep going back to your clinicians perhaps that are using a template and say, is this working for you? Do we need to make some changes? Don't just consider the IT person at that stage, but the clinicians or the reception staff that are using these particular items. Are they working? Are there ways that we can make it better for you? So as you're executing your project, you are still continuously re-evaluating to see if there are better ways of doing things. We're looking at that quality. We're looking at staff training. We're looking at making sure all our documentation is correct. And I always believe truly that if you consider that if you leave somewhere and move on, or you retire, or you're not there, and CQC come in, or NHS England wants to see how the project is doing because they funded it, that somebody should be able to open your projects folder within your computer system, or if you're still old-fashioned and printing things in a great big folder somewhere, but you need to have every bit of documentation in there to prove what you've done, that can be looked at even if you are not available to sit and go through it, that somebody else should be able to do that. So keep things detailed, keep subfolders, keep things that are planned so that it is meticulous for anyone to go over that project and make sure that it can be fully understood by someone, even if you are not there. Whether you're running the project or not, it needs to be understood by others as required. You need to get the buy-in from your team. So some of that is making sure they have adequate training, but what's in it for them always needs to be considered. Continually update your comms. Don't just go out at the beginning. If it's something for patients, this is the way we're doing it. The end. Keep reminding, going over it, explaining, because some people may have missed it the first, second, or third time, or they might be new patients coming in. So keep those comms updated so that people have the ability to find out why the changes have been made and what's in it for them, because that's what people want. They want to know what's better for them. So we need to go over that with our team, how this will assist them, how this will make things better for them. There will always be resistance to change from some people. You will have members of your team who love change. You will have members of your team who hate change. So if you've got that hatred of change, we need to go over that and find something that will buy in for them and make them want to be part of this project and not be left behind. But we also don't want to antagonize our team, so we want to get them involved and get them enjoying and seeing the benefits of whatever the project may be. Even if it's if we have this project ongoing, in the end, less patients will be calling in to reception to book an appointment because they will have been seen by this other project. So that will make your life easier. Something as simple as that. If you're looking at an estates project, you need to think very carefully about inclusive niceties for the staff that are involved with that, because they will have all the disruption but not the nice stuff. So get your buy-in for that. And as I say, there is a separate video on that. If you're doing a massive project like merging surgeries or taking on another surgery, you need to think that your staff are going to go through that horrendous change and fear. So keep them informed, because information is key to helping them feel better about things. And there will be a separate video talking about merging. So if that's something, I would suggest you watch that alongside with looking at this project. And do remember that all projects work through these same 5 stages, because we will be going to stage 5 next, of closure. All projects, project management, all run through these particular stages, working through whether it's a project in healthcare, whether it's a project at home, or whether it's a project somewhere else in the wider world of project management. My son is actually a project manager and works in environmental work within transport, and I talked to project management, talk through with him, and we covered all the same areas. They may have been a little different within the underwriting, but the same 5 stages come through for all of those. So we work in the same manner when we're project managing any project. It's just the size of the business case may be different. If you're looking at putting in a new extension at home or a kitchen at home, this could be, you may not need a business case with your own partner at home, but you probably need some rough plans written down that involve the things that would be in a more formal business case, looking at the budget, looking at the upheaval, and where we talk about the larger upheaval when we're looking at, say, let's not do this at a time when there's a flu clinic going on. If that's in your own home, it might be, let's not do this while we've got such and such a person coming to visit. So the projects work the same, whether they are giant projects or they are small projects. We just make them work to our specific criteria, but you may not need to go quite as formal when you're talking through with your husband at home. You may need to, but that's for another subject. And finally, the last bit, because people forget once they have got on to the project actually happening, they move on to something else. But actually, we need to capture and log our lessons learnt. What went well, but be really honest. What didn't go well? What would be perhaps a significant event if it was something that was already on running? But what are our lessons that we've learnt from this? Have we perhaps not delegated enough? And that's something to think about for the next project. Or have we not delegated too much and not kept control of the project? Have we had people that weren't necessary in meetings and therefore pulled them out of their day-to-day job. So do a full project outcomes assessment and a post-implementation review. Have a look through that and just see, are there parts of this project that we could do differently next time when we do another project? And as I say, all projects run through these same things. So we can look and learn from any project for a different project. And the bit that most people forget is we need to celebrate the success. Because if a project has gone really well, it's successful, don't forget to celebrate it and don't forget to thank those team members. Personal one for me that I remember really well was putting together a move of 3 different surgeries. We had to move one building that was being derelict into 3 other buildings, which included a huge extension that had been put on, that I project managed the extension. We planned and moved across all of these in a weekend where the staff gave up their time. We worked with movers, but lots of the staff came in, often with their partners who were putting desks together, planning everything, getting everything organised, making sure we had a clinician, a nurse, come through and look and check everything to make sure that on the Monday morning, everyone could walk in to 3 different buildings that we had managed with our project teams to have this full move completed. And we worked through all of that. And although I bought lunch for all of the team on the Saturday, and I personally thanked all the team for their hard work, when we walked in on the Monday morning, we heard a few comments of, I can't find this, or where do I find that in my new room? There were no words of thank you from any of the partners because they just assumed it would work. So don't forget to celebrate that success and thank the people that have worked really, really hard on this project, particularly if you haven't. If this project has been left for somebody else and they have succeeded in it, make sure that not only you thank them, but you thank them publicly. Get that word out, maybe in a email across your team saying thank you to the team that gave up their weekend or gave up the last few months or gave up some time or worked really hard on this wonderful project that's doing really well. So celebrate that success and celebrate it out there and make sure that your team know they are valued, because it is really important whether they decide to stay with you or whether it's the final straw and they move on. Just that little word of thanks can make all the difference in the world. So finally, I'm just going to go over with you. So this video will be available and there will be notes on how to obtain any paperwork that may help you through your project. And some examples of those there are going to be some different listings of the things that you need to do within a project that will come out to you. There will be a couple of samples of business cases and plan on a pages. So the plan on the page will be quite a straightforward 1-page document that will just give you some headings that you need to work under and put your plan into. As I said, you may get that documentation, that may happen for you, but if not, this will give you an example of that. There is a very large project plan that it was actually originally one that I used for a new build that I was working on as an extra consultant within that new build surgery. So it is a huge plan. I think it's about 70 pages. And you'll need to obviously work through. If you're going to do something as big as that, I would recommend you get someone from the ICB working with you on these project plans, depending on what it is. If it's an estates plan, get someone from estates in. If it's a comms plan, get someone from communications in. And then there is a smaller business case that again could be used for anything. This was a particular template plan for me that I used in 2 different cases. One was mobilising a shutting down of a surgery and moving into different buildings. And I used a business case for how that would work. I also used the same business case template, obviously very different details in it, looking at mergers. So they can be used for all different areas of work. There is a baseline assessment that will give you an idea of how to create your baseline assessment that can be then embedded into your plan. But as I said, that can be a much smaller plan in smaller projects. And finally, there's a communication and engagement plan. Again, as I suggested before, if you've got a big project that's going to affect your patients, get your ICB comms team involved. They will write a really good comms plan for you that you can probably just tweak a little. But that's really important to make sure that the legalities are followed with if it is something that really needs to get out there to patients, like moving businesses, etc. And don't forget your stakeholders. If you are getting involved with something that will involve CQC, you will need to ensure that CQC understand there is either new work going on that they need to understand and know and add to your CQC plan to suggest that that's an acceptable thing to be doing in an NHS building. So that's something you may need to consider. Or if you are looking at merging or moving buildings, again, CQC need to be involved. It's a very brief overview today of how to project manage in general practice, but I really hope that it's been useful for you. And if you work through those 5 stages, you can work those for any project that you use. So I'm really hoping that today's been useful for you. Thank you very much for your time. I know our time is precious, but hopefully this will save you a little bit of time in the future. So I'll say thank you very much and goodbye.